Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Conjurer, Páthos, out July 1st on Nuclear Blast. The album has 8 tracks, 50 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a sludge doom metal band from the UK. As you would come to expect from a record that really brings the influences from sludge doom and even post-metal, this is going to be a very thick sounding album. It just has that meaty approach to it from start to end. It's a record that really forces you to work your way through it. It just doesn't allow you to always see the path, and it doesn't allow you to just kind of breeze through. You have to immerse yourself in the album. You have to give yourself enough time to really appreciate what this record offers from just a structural perspective and how you can navigate through that same structure. The beauty about this record that perhaps separates them from other albums that have the same sort of experience, the same sort of sound, is that they created enough nuances within individual songs and in the overall track listing. A song like Suffer Alone, for example, it's a reset within an album that doesn't have any song that comes close to that one in terms of the energy, in terms of the drive, and how direct it is. So they created enough nuances musically and from a structural perspective that allows the listener to feel like there are pockets of air in a record that overall feels like it's at times suffocating you. And this makes for a better experience. It makes the album feel almost more fluid, more dynamic, more mobile, even though at times it looks like you're not really going anywhere. You're just kind of sinking in to the darkness and heaviness that the album holds. But these little pockets here and there, changing vocal styles, including acoustic guitars, changing the dynamic of the songs, creating ebbs and flows within the tracks and from track to track. It's all things that are not necessarily in the forefront, or they are not necessarily noticeable from the get-go, but the more you listen to the record, the more you dive deeper into the album, the more you realize their importance and how well crafted the album is in order to create these little pockets that makes the fluidity of the album seem a little bit better, that gives more momentum to a record that otherwise would just not move at all. As far as soundscape is concerned, the record is a perfect blend of 3 genres: sludge, doom, and post-metal. Really hard to determine which one has a bigger role or a bigger impact in the sound, in the atmosphere. I feel like all 3 combined are the impact, are the experience, are the atmosphere. This record has great sound from that perspective. Is a powerful album, is a meaty record. It's very thick, but that thickness is not murky. It doesn't have fuzziness on the guitars. It doesn't lose itself within itself. The sound is still very clear. For a record that feels this big, that sounds this powerful, I'm actually really surprised on how well defined the experience is. It's not a record that starts to lose the shapes or starts to lose the overall dynamic that it has because of how the sound carries itself. This album has the ability to be defined, to have shapes, for you to see those shapes, for you to see that definition, and then still allow for those shapes into definition to be stretched out, to be expanded and contracted, because this album has a lot of lateral movement. I actually don't feel like the movement is necessarily up and down, it's more side to side. Think about it by having 2 different walls, and the sound, the experience, the vocals, everything is bouncing off of those 2 different walls. Sometimes you're in the middle, sometimes you're more towards the left, sometimes you're more towards the right. That's the kind of sound that you're going to get on this record, but it's a really good sound for the overall record that it is. A sound that surprised me and had a positive impact on how I perceive this record. Not only the structure helps the definition of the album, not only the structure helps you better digest this record and actually sit through the 50 minutes, go from the first to the last song, but the soundscape, the sound quality, the mixing, the production also helps the record be a little bit more reachable, be a little bit more approachable, even for the fans that are not necessarily gravitating towards this specific sound. This album still has enough elements in it that will pique the attention of those in the periphery. Now, those elements of the sound that have perhaps the biggest responsibility for the overall experience are definitely the drums and guitars. Starting off with the drums, there are portions on this album where the drums are just so powerful, so heavy, so thunderous that it's impossible for you to pay attention to anything else. You're just so focused and gravitating towards the power that they give, the drive that they create, the energy that they infuse. Think about a fire and then thinking about throwing gasoline into that fire. That's how the drums come across during certain portions of this record. And that is an element that ignites the record, that pushes the album forward, that takes it from the shadows and brings it into the light, even though the light is super dimmed throughout the entire record. But I love the drum sound. I love those bursts of energy that come out. They really feel like they're coming out from the core of the album, almost like a volcano erupting, because drum-wise, this album is always bubbling. You feel that volcano, that magma chamber is about to erupt at every single second, and when it does, it's powerful, it changes the dynamics of the songs, and it really gives life to the overall soundscape. Now, the guitars are a little bit more volatile. They don't have this burst, they don't have the same aroma, they don't have the same sound, the same feel as the drums do. The guitars are a little bit more fluid. They're already moving a lot better throughout the entire record. From the acoustic to the melodic side, to the heavy side, to the melancholic side, this album has so much for you to digest guitar-wise that really blew my mind. I was expecting the album to be more fuzzy, to be more controlled, for the guitars to stay more in the pocket, one directional, always moving in the same speed at the same time, in the same direction, with the same intent, and that's not what I got on this album. The guitars feel like they have a lot more life, they have a lot more to give, and a lot of those pockets that allow you to breathe throughout the entire record are provided by the guitars, by the melodies, by the somber darkness, by the somber nature of the sound and the atmosphere that comes from it. I love the overall execution. I love how much they extended the guitars, even bringing prog and technical death metal elements into the picture, just sprinkling them in for a little bit of flavor here and there, not to change who they are as a band, but introducing elements that perhaps would be foreign to their sound, so that they can create a much better recipe and create much better songs that have a lot more for the listener to gravitate towards. The guitars are definitely the ones to be blamed for that sort of experience. Now, vocally, the record is almost as interesting, as engaging as it is sound-wise. I was expecting once again for the album to be a lot more one-directional vocally, but this album doesn't give you that. It also gives you a wide range of variety of elements. Clean vocals, female vocals here and there, and then a lot of layers when it comes to the harsh screaming vocals that works really well. But starting off with the clean vocals, some of the pockets that we see throughout the record, musically, in terms of going into acoustic guitars, in terms of going into more melodic bridges, we also see those same pockets coming across with the vocals, using clean vocals here and there throughout the tracks, using some female vocals here and there in order to give a different fragrance, coming in with spoken word, changing your perception of where this record is going, of where those songs are heading. And then it hits you hard once it comes to the heavy vocals, allowing a lot of the times for those vocals to come in with layers to them, so they feel even bigger, they feel even thicker, but they also create depth. If you just have one single vocal line, either be the screaming vocals or the harsh vocals, it thins out the experience. And if you have an album that's all about being meaty, that's all about being thick, at times you need to make sure that those vocals are as meaty, are as thick. And because it doesn't come across, the vocals don't come across with a deeper tone, they come across a little bit more penetrating. Adding those layers to them adds the necessary thickness that you need, that balances out the vocal performance with the soundscape and the experience that that same soundscape creates. So really well done. Matching these two is the winning formula for an album like this. Now, overall, the album has a sense of direction. I think they could define that direction slightly better, and that's one of the things that they have to improve as they move along into future albums. Understanding exactly what the journey is, and then better defining the parameters of this journey. On this record, you start to see the footprint of that journey, and you start to see the footprint of those parameters, but they're not extremely clear. I think there's still room to make them a little bit better defined, so the overall song construction, the overall album feels a little bit better together, feels a little bit more unified, it feels a little bit more mature. They're starting to find themselves. This record really feels like they're opening the door in order to discover who they are as a band and what their sound is going to be like, but the door is not fully open and they haven't really crossed through it. This album is definitely a stepping stone, and you could see they're on the cusp of really discovering who Conjurer is all about. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with All You Will Remember. This track has a nice build-up, and that nice build-up, that nice intro really peaks into the cleaning vocals. Then the transition from the cleaning vocals into the harsh vocals, it's so smooth that you almost forget it's happening until you're already in there. Using layers to the vocals, as I mentioned earlier, gives depth in width to how this song comes across in terms of how you're going to process the vocal lines in comparison to how the sound feels and how the sound is being put together. The track moves up and down, but it also moves laterally. It really comes down to your perception. I almost felt like the track moved more laterally than it did up and down. It has this ability to bounce off of these two different walls, something that you're going to see throughout the entire record, but maybe a little bit better defined in a track like this. It's not a track that has more of a constant drive. It's a track that feels a little bit more chaotic in its existence, so you're able to see those bounces off of those two walls a little bit better and right in front of you. The drums throughout are killer. There are some of those bursts, some of those volcanic bursts exist within this song. The guitar helps define the atmosphere from start to finish, and then there are some female vocals on this track. They come in as a spoken word, creating a bridge that works really well. It leads you into the finale, it leads you into the closing of the track. It gives you a sense of coming to an end, and then at the end there's that exclamation mark in terms of finishing off very heavy and very powerful. Next you have Those Years Condemned. This is my favorite song on the album. It's absolutely haunting. It starts off very stripped down with an incredible guitar melody, and that guitar melody becomes the red line of the entire song because it stays there, not in that original format all the time, but the melody stays there and it weaves itself in and out throughout the entire song, and that is that red line that you can connect with right at the beginning and stay connected with it all the way through. Is the breadcrumbs that you can follow from start to finish as far as the song is concerned. It has great heaviness, it has great brutality at times, and it works really well in order to create that sense of brutality and heaviness, but never lose the somber nature that becomes the backdrop of what this track is really all about. Very musically driven, powerful song all around. The vocals feel more organic, more emotional. Overall, the song feels very emotional. It's a song that's dripped in emotion. It comes across in that somber sound, comes across in that melody, comes across in the volatility that it has, and how it's constructed and how it's delivered. Last but not least, Suffer Alone. This is one of the most direct tracks on the album, if not the most direct song on the album, and it works almost as a reset. There's no track that sounds or feels like this one up until this point. Nothing sounds and feels like this after this point. This song is very different from how it sounds, how it comes together, the length of the song, the attributes that the song has. It feels almost more like a technical death metal track with some prog elements. So it has a lot of movement, but the movement is not lateral, the movement is forward. It's a song that's always moving you forward as a listener. You feel like you're rushing through it. This song doesn't take time or doesn't give you time to breathe or pause within it. It's all about taking you to that final destination in the quickest way possible, and then show you as much as it can, include as many attributes in it as it can in that short period of time. Really interesting track, a track that resets your perception of the album, because like I said, it sounds very different from everything that surrounds it. This is it, Conjurer, Páthos, out July 1st on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.